Hey everybody, Escape211 here, and today we are looking at the Particle Beam 8. I am actually on the live server. I wanted to try things different this time, and I know I'm a little late on doing this, but I wanted to actually try this on the live server when I got it against players. However, because I wanted to do it in its natural star rating and set up like where it is on the gear hub, I realized my hanger would basically feel like an SP dropping like tanking hanger. So I'm like, you know, I'm just gonna do a custom match with bots just to play around with it around that level so that I don't mess with anybody. But ultimately, this is just some footage that I recorded before in one of the matches that I had decently with this weapon. Overall, I feel like this is a very unique weapon, and I like that aspect of it. You know, especially in how it functions, but it is one that is just not quite there for me overall, especially in the 8 category here, but we're going to talk about it. So functionality wise, this weapon, as you probably already know, I won't even show stats, has a like beam function and then a blast function. The beam function will feel a lot like other beam weapons, and it is designed that as you hit targets, and you have to hit targets, it will charge up the blast function. The blast feels like a railgun shot, as again, you've probably already heard. What's interesting or unique about this is that you essentially have unlimited ammo in the beam capacity. When you hold down the button to fire, when you are in beam mode, you can hold it down forever. You don't have to, you know, wait for a certain amount of mag or charge or anything like that. However, once you have a 100% charge and you let go of the fire button, the next time you press it, it will fire your charged shot. So essentially, I didn't do it here, but you could go back and forth between each side where you continually have a beam sustained damage weapon up, and then you have a charge shot in the chamber on the other side, which would be an interesting way to play this if you want to be continually like having sustained damage. The problem with this weapon overall, even though it has a very flexible play style in that sense, is really in how the overall like play will go, because this is a beam weapon and its actual damages or damage values as a beam weapon is similar to that to the stasis beam, which is pretty bad overall. It's not even hitting like grav beam levels for the beam side. And when you get into its charge shot, it will feel like a railgun shot. It actually does a little bit more damage, like base damage, than a railgun shot. But when you consider double damage chances with a railgun, you may have better chances for like one-hit KO potential with a railgun than you would with this weapon. So in some respects, that's good or bad, depending on how you like it. I mean, it has a varying degree of flexibility. You're probably, in that sense, paying for it, but not a flexibility in a good way, right? It's giving you a beam sustained damage, which sustained damage is already bad in this game. You know, assault weapons are terrible, and exposure is just bad. So that's not good. And then the idea of a single railgun shot sounds awesome, but why not just use railguns then? You're going to do better off than you would generally with this weapon in that sense. So it fails in a couple areas. I do like the idea behind this weapon though. I like the idea of its flexibility, and I think if they were to focus or play with the stats a little bit more after this is out on the field for a bit, this could potentially be a decent weapon, because the grav beams, even though they're very good, they are bot killing machines. We all know this. The grav beams are just generally good at that because the exposure you need for yourself and your target, real players are gonna hide. They're not gonna take that kind of damage. Whereas this weapon, once you hit something, even if it's just a little bit, it will work towards your next charge shot. So you can mitigate your level of exposure based on what you need, so that you don't end up overexposing yourself, and you can just do little small amounts of damage, corner shooting, that kind of stuff more easily with this kind of setup. So the potential for a beam weapon is there with this, but because again, it's a little lackluster on both sides and just lackluster in general in the beam category, this is not going to form too well for most people. Now, I'm kind of just saying that in general because I'm looking at the 8, but when you compare it and you kind of like scale those stats, even if you were to get to higher things like 12 or 16, we don't really know what we're going to get yet, but even when you do, I still think that that's going to do poorly. So that's kind of like where I sit in that overall thought process. I think if the damage percentage values were upped on this, or if you were able to charge more than one shot or something else with the mechanics, that could be really interesting and probably make this weapon have some potential. But as it sits right now, it is probably not going to be worth it. Certainly not the 8 here, but I also think that as we get into the other categories, not going to compete with the meta. Partially because the meta is just over dominant, right? The sniper weapons and disc launchers are just too crazy, probably need some balancing themselves. That's probably another discussion for another time. But, you know, overall, I hate to see a weapon that's interesting like this suffer, but that's just the reality of the situation right now. So that's my overall thinking with this weapon. Like I said, I like the idea of it, but you guys can let me know what you think. if this is something you actually will play or you think will happen, like we'll see it when we get to 12 or 16, feel free to comment below, and we'll see you out there on the battlefield.